Hi everyone, my name is Ulrika Klomp and this is my name sign. I'm a young woman with white skin, blonde hair till my shoulders, blue eyes, and I'm wearing a dark blue dress with a black vest. I'm a hearing and sighted person and the voice you're hearing is mine. And I'll present today together with my colleague Johan Groskamp. He'll be using sign language of the Netherlands and during his parts you'll hear my voice as well. He will now present himself. My name is Johan Groskamp. And this is my name sign. I have Usher. I'm born deaf. And my sight has decreased over time. I have brown hair, a white skin, and I'm wearing glasses. I have green eyes, and I'm wearing a black sweater. I will now tell you more about the project Insight into Assistive Products. The first slide is called the larger project. We started it in 2020 and it ran until 2022. The topic was assistive products. We wanted to investigate several things around this topic. For example, which assistive products are used by people with deafblindness? We also wanted to know how satisfied they are with these products. And this is because we wanted to improve services around assistive products. The project had different parts. One part was to make a list of available assistive products. Another part was a literature study, in which we read different papers. And the third part was a practical study. I will now tell you more about this practical study. The next slide is about the practical study. We had 4 main questions. The first one was, which assistive products are used? The second was, what are the experiences of people with deafblindness, professionals who are working with people with deafblindness, and family members of people with deafblindness with these assistive products. The third question, what kind of assistive products do people wish for example, in the future? The last question, how do people get information about these assistive products? Next slides, on methods and participants. We developed an online questionnaire. It had 3 versions. First one for deafblind people who could fill it out themselves. Second version was for professionals who are working with deafblind people who can't fill it out themselves. And the third one for family members. We set out the questionnaire and received a lot of answers. As for version 1, 24 people with deafblindness participated. The version for professionals was filled out 32 times, and version 3 by 5 family members. So in total we had 61 participants. The next slide is about the questionnaire. We asked people which assistive products they used in different domains. These domains were communication, mobility, daily life, and other. We then asked how satisfied people were with their assistive products and about positive and negative experiences with the products. Then we asked about wishes for new assistive products. And the last part was about how they received information about the products. The average time to fill out the questionnaire was about 1 hour. This was Johan's part, and I will now continue with the rest of the presentation. And the next slide is called Analysis Part 1. We define an assistive product as a product that enables people with deafblindness to perform a certain task or that eases this performance. We also included adaptations in the interior because the borderline between adaptations for which an assistive product was needed and adaptations for which this wasn't needed wasn't always so clear. So we decided to include all adaptations in the interior. On the slide are some examples of products that we included, such as a white cane, a vibrating alarm, and adapted lighting. We didn't include assistive services, such as interpreters, and we also didn't include assistive products that aren't used for compensating for the eyes or ears, such as a wheelchair. Another factor of exclusion was when it concerned a language or communication system, such as sign language, as this isn't a product. The next slide is called Analysis Part 2. We categorized the assistive products that were filled out into functional domains and into sensory domains. As for functional domains, the categories were the same as in the questionnaire itself, but it turned out that the category of other wasn't used, so this was deleted. We also categorized the products into sensory domains. We had the following categories: products that are used for compensating sight, products for enlarging sight, for compensating hearing, for enlarging hearing, or compensating both, or multifunctional. With multifunctional, we mean that it sometimes compensates for one sense and sometimes for the other, such as a tablet, which may have an app for magnification, but also an app for adapting settings on a hearing device. We also had the category non-sensory, which meant that the product would be excluded from our results, and the category insecure, but we will not talk about it any further. We now turn to the results, and the slide is called Assistive Products number 1. 316 assistive products were mentioned in the questionnaires, of which 76 were unique and fitted our definition. Most of them were products used for communication. As for the sensory domain, most of them were used for enlarging or compensating sight. We also counted which products were the most frequently mentioned, and this is on the next slide. And on position 1 here is a white cane, position 2 is a hearing aid, position 3 smartphone, position 4 a tablet, and a shared position 5 and 6 are a pager and a screen magnifier. On position 7 are things we combined under adjusted interior, and a shared position 8 till 10 is held by referential objects, a vibrating alarm clock, and pictograms. We now turn to the experiences of the participants with the assistive products that they filled out. As for satisfactory, we only asked people with deafblindness themselves to fill out how satisfied they were with their products, and not the professionals and family members, as it is too subjective. It turned out that people with deafblindness are very satisfied with their assistive products. More than 80% of their satisfactory rates was satisfied or very satisfied. When we look at the positive and negative experiences that people filled out, which we, by the way, asked to all the participants of the survey, we see that most of the experiences are about usefulness. So some examples of mentioned experiences are on the slide. A positive experience with which someone mentioned about their assistive product was that it is easy to use, and a negative experience is that their product quickly breaks. So these results suggest that assistive products partly reach up to expectations, but also partly not. The next slide is results wishes. The participants were invited to also fill out what kind of products they wish they had, but didn't have yet. We categorized these wishes into functional domains again, and communication products were again in the lead. People gave different reasons for not having their products yet. So for example, the fact that the product doesn't exist yet, such as a self-driving car, or that the product is too expensive to buy. The next slide is called Information Services. We now turn to the results regarding our last research question on how people receive information on assistive products now and how they ideally would like to receive information. People with deafblindness indicated that they mostly received information from professionals, they look on the internet, and they read newsletters. Professionals and family members also mentioned the internet, but also mentioned receiving information from clients or the family member itself, and professionals or colleagues. Ideally, people with deafblindness would like to try out products before they would buy it. They prefer to read about it, and they would like to share experiences among each other. Professionals and family members would like to read about assistive products in newsletters and leaflets. They would like to visit events where products are presented, and they would like the possibility for their family member or clients to try out the product. There are some elements of our research we want to highlight now. First, we want to say again that the definition of assistive product that we used was a definition as we used in a larger project. So this was convenient for us, but it's good to realize that using another definition could naturally have resulted in another final list of products with maybe more or less unique assistive products on it. An interesting result was that most of the products that were mentioned in the list of used products and in the list of products that people wished for seemed to be in the domain of communication. But it must be noted here that we didn't test for significance, so we can only say that communication seemed to be a more popular domain. We have two explanations for this. First, that this domain is indeed a domain where people with deafblindness tend to use multiple assistive products for, as communication is very important in everyday life, and products in this domain may prevent isolation for people with deafblindness. A second explanation is a methodological one, as in the questionnaire, the domain of communication was the first domain that we asked about. So it could be that because of matters of time and concentration, people filled out this domain more than products for the other domains that followed. A third important point that we want to discuss is a limitation of our research, namely that our group of participants was likely not to be very representative. We say likely because there is a lack of research on the population of people with deafblindness in the Netherlands, and without a good description of the characteristics of the population, we also can't know if a sample is representative. We now turn to the conclusion. We found that 76 unique assistive products were used and that the domain of communication was extra relevant. Because of our initial goal, to get an overview of assistive products and to learn more about their usability, we advise organizations to assign an expert which stays up to date on this matter. Technology is developing fast, and it would be good to have someone around with specialized knowledge on assistive products who can make time to look into specific products and the feasibility of it for certain clients. As for people with deafblindness, since the population is so diverse, there's no one-size-fits-all. We advise that people with deafblindness try different options to see what fits best and to learn about the usability of a product for you personally. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marguerite Tibaud, and I'll be providing this overview of promising practices, considerations for the accessibility of sign language for individuals with cortical cerebral visual impairment, CVI. Let's start with a definition and prevalence. CVI is a brain-based visual impairment caused by damage to the visual pathways or processing areas of the brain. CVI can result in a spectrum of visual behaviors consistent with ventral and dorsal stream dysfunction, causing difficulty with object recognition and impaired visuospatial processing, respectively. CVI is the leading cause of pediatric congenital visual impairment in developed countries. And a recent study conducted in 2021 through the University of Bristol found that brain-related visual impairment may affect 1 in every 30 children. As I mentioned, the dorsal and ventral stream dysfunction, here are some simplified definitions of what these streams are responsible for. For the dorsal stream, it's known as the where and how stream, and it supports the behavioral goals of action control and the understanding of spatial relationships. The ventral stream is referred to as the who and what system, processing information around the recognition of objects and faces. The dorsal and ventral streams are highly interconnected in the processing of and response to sensory information. So while described as isolated streams, they are very much functionally integrated. On the slide here, I have an image of the brain that outlines the dorsal and ventral streams. The dorsal stream extends from the back of the brain at the occipital lobe up through the parietal lobe and into the frontal lobe. The ventral stream extends from the occipital lobe at the back of the brain over to the temporal lobe, which is behind the ears. When it comes to deafblindness and CVI, there must be consideration for CVI secondary to associated neurological abnormalities. There are shared roots with known risk factors for deafblindness. Some examples are the complications from prematurity, cytomegalovirus, CMV, hydrocephalus, microcephaly, asphyxia, head injury, and meningitis. And CVI may also co-occur with genetic syndromes and chromosomal abnormalities, such as Down syndrome, Charge syndrome, or Cornelia de Lange syndrome. Here in the Deafblind program at Perkins School for the Blind, 56% of our students in the deafblind population have a diagnosis of CVI. So we do know that CVI can be prevalent within the deafblind community. And this is why we need to be thinking about sign language accessibility. So here's some considerations for assessment as it relates to sign language and CDI. Sign language is a visual iconic language. It's primarily a visuospatial language, and it relies heavily on the analysis of hand motion. Language, first and foremost, must be available for the senses. For children with CDI, visual attention and visual recognition abilities can be deceiving and are often misunderstood. And many children with CDI may also have coexisting ocular impairments, such as strabismus, nystagmus, and refractive error. So if we don't fully understand how CDI is impacting a child's accessibility, then we might be providing language in a form that is visually inaccessible. And this is why assessment in these areas is so critical. On the slide here, I have an image of in-air sign language where an adult is signing to a child who is receiving it visually, and then tactile sign language where an instructor has their hands under the hands of their student. There are some general goals when it comes to assessment. We have to understand that what is going into the brain is going to influence what comes out. So as we go through assessment, we want to know what signs are being perceived perceptively by the student. We want to identify which factors are supporting these abilities and which factors are causing difficulties. We want to know what signs are being produced expressively. Are they traditional? Are they approximations, modified? Do they have increased body-to-body contact? Do motor impairments explain any of these difficulties? We want to identify the trends and also being mindful of the fact that there are many different reasons why a sign might be received differently or expressed differently. Here's an overview of the elements of sign language. There's hand shape, palm orientation, location, movement, and non-manual markers. The hand shape refers to the configuration of the hands during sign. Palm orientation refers to the direction that the palm faces. Location is where the sign or signs take place in the signing area. Movement refers to the changing of the location in the physical space during sign production. And non-manual markers is the use of facial expressions and body language. While these are elements of sign explained in subunits, it's how the users are constantly manipulating perceiving signs created in space to communicate complex concepts. So how all of these different elements work together to convey language. When it comes to CDI implications and the elements of sign, we need to think about what could be impacting that child's ability to receive that sensory information. Children with CDI may have impaired visual attention, impaired form recognition, impacted visual fields. They may engage in serial processing. They might have impacted visuospatial skills, prosopagnosia, or impaired motion perception. All of these areas of challenge could impact access to hand shape, palm orientation, location, movement, non-manual markers, again, all being used at the same time. We also want to think about identification of compensatory strategy reliance in addition to visual accessibility. So if the child's not receiving information visually, what non-visual abilities are they using to help them gather information and learn? We're going to start with visual attention as it relates to sign and implications of CDI. So as all of the sign elements are used together to convey language, visual attention must be maintained in order to gain information. Here's what we know about some implications of CDI. We know that damage along the occipital, parietal, frontal pathway, referred to as the dorsal stream, can cause difficulty with visual spatial attention, sustained attention, selective attention, and visual search. So this could impact a student's ability to visually search for a signing partner or signs among competing distractors. It might impact their ability to attend to the sign language while ignoring other stimuli. And it also might impact their ability to then take that information and match that sign to their visual library to support the speed and efficiency of recognition. When it comes to including the voices of CDI, so individuals living with CDI, here are some reports around visual attention. Adults with CDI have reported to become visually distracted and pulled towards bright, bold colors in the environment. There's been reports of having little control over where their eyes attend when presented with clutter. So we have to be mindful of this when it comes to sign language accessibility and visual attention abilities. For the impact of motion in CDI, when it comes to sign language, signs change meaning based on the direction. Movement of signs also gives information about the subject and object of the sentence. Here's what we know about motion processing in CDI. And these are some quotes taken directly from the research. On average, individuals with CVI require nearly 3 times the motion coherence signals in order to reliably detect the direction of movement of the optic flow stimulus. Children with CVI may manifest motion perception deficits attributed to dorsal stream dysfunction, including abnormalities in detection of optic flow and global or biologically relevant motion, as well as visual motor integration deficits leading to optic ataxia. And individuals with CVI may also experience dyskinetopsia, where movement is processed more slowly. So we have to consider all this when it comes to our students in understanding how the speed of sign or motion of sign is impacting their ability to perceive it. Next is the signing area and the visual field. When using sign language, the signing occurs in the front of the body, from the top of the head down to the waist, shoulder to shoulder. The location of the signs will impact the meaning of the signs. This is what we know about visual field and CVI. We know that effects of visual field deficits, which is common in individuals with CVI, may include impaired visual motor coordination and may impact social interaction. There may also be focal deficits. Visuospatial neglect or visual inattention is the difficulty of detecting or acting upon visual stimuli on one side of space. That can also impact access. Then there's simultaneous agnosia, where an individual perceives one stimuli at a time. Visual field can also be impacted by contrast sensitivity, ocular motor challenges, visual motor difficulties, visual clutter, competing sensory stimuli, visual fatigue, and motion in the environment. So there are many different factors that can change signing area accessibility and visual field abilities across any given moment. Here's a quote from an adult living with CVI, and if you want to see the whole blog from Nicola McDowell, the link is in the work cited. Nicola McDowell says, "Because I am only seeing these things in isolation, I couldn't possibly tell you where they are in relation to each other." So this is a description, again, of experiencing simultaneous agnosia. So seeing one thing at a time causes difficulty knowing where everything is in relation to one another. So how could that be experienced if trying to understand the location of signs and how they relate to other signs in different locations through that intensity of collective movement, motion, and changes of palm orientation and hand shape. This brings us to spatial skills in sign because these two areas are highly interconnected. So spatial skills is an umbrella term that includes spatial visualization, spatial orientation, and mental rotation. So in learning sign language, the learner sees that sign, flips the sign up to 180 degrees in order to properly produce it with their own hands. The signer must consider the signer's perspective, rotate those movements, and then map it onto their own bodies. Individuals with CVI will often have, again, that visual impairment associated with dysfunction of the parietal lobe, which is part of the dorsal stream. And this could potentially impact an individual's ability to perform that mental rotation, as this occurs bilaterally in the parietal cortex. It might impact their ability to evaluate the relative spatial positions of objects in a visual scene. It might also impact their ability to differentiate between the right and left sides of space. There might be also right-left confusion, which is associated with parietal lobe dysfunction. Last are non-manual markers. So non-manual markers are facial expressions and body language that convey meaning in addition to the use of the hands. Facial expressions represent tone, emotion, and intent, and the body is used to convey past, present, and future. And the speed of facial expressions convey meaning. Individuals with CVI might have prosopagnosia, which can result in impaired facial recognition. CVI may also result in an impacted biological motion processing, which is the ability to perceive movement of a living creature and make inferences. It can result in difficulty with processing changeable aspects of faces, such as facial expressions, direction of eye gaze, expression, lip movements, or lip reading. In conclusion of this overview, while our understanding of CVI continues to evolve, the issue of accessibility is well understood. So we have to have consideration for sign language accessibility in regards to CVI implications. When we approach this subject, it is important to understand that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about methodical observation and assessment to understand how each child individually is impacted by CVI so that we can provide language that is rich and accessible. For the full presentation and additional information, please visit perkins.org for the section of CVI for the TBI. Thank you so much.